Hey, what's up everybody? It's TheHyphenate here, and today we're going to talk about the Sony 20mm f1.8 G lens. This is designed for the Sony full-frame E-mount cameras, and overall it's great. It's wide angle, fast, lightweight, compact, and produces beautiful images for both video and photo. Currently, I'm shooting this video on the Sony 20mm f1.8 at f1.8, and I'm currently in my music studio, which is only about 10 by 10 feet. So it's actually pretty small, but with this lens, you're actually able to see a good portion of it, which is great. When I shoot in here with tighter lenses, 35mm and up, I feel it's a little too tight. So if you're ever doing any videos in small spaces, this is a great lens, not only because you get a good amount of the space, but also it has very low distortion. It doesn't make it look awkward or too stretched out, and you actually don't get a lot of bowing on the tops or the sides, which is great. Also, it doesn't stretch out the face very much. A great thing about this lens is that it does have a pretty close minimum focusing distance, which is about 7 inches. Now, one big issue that I have when it comes to video is that this lens suffers from focus breathing pretty much as the G Master lenses do. Now, here we're gonna see the focus breathing. So pay attention to the sides of this, and you'll see as I'm here and then I move back, that focus breathing is pretty apparent. So the focal length actually does change slightly, and to me it's a little too much. So if you're shooting video where your subject is moving back and forth between different depths, the distance, you're gonna notice that focus breathing a little too much, in my opinion. But if you're doing videos where the subject is not moving too much, then you won't really notice it. Let me do another little test. Again, pay attention to the sides. And you see that? That's a pretty significant focal change. Now, really, this is the only issue that I have for video with using this lens. Now, I do have a media company that does a lot of video production, so everything from music videos to weddings, quinceañeras, sweet 16s, all that good stuff. For that type of work where there's a lot of movement, I do not use this lens. I actually use the Sony 35mm f1.8 lens. And at this very moment in time, I'm really hoping that Sony launches a 24mm f1.8 lens. But for YouTube videos, beat making videos, things where I'm not moving much, I'm actually really loving this lens. Now, when it comes to photography, focus breathing is not really an issue, so that's not something you have to worry about unless you're doing landscape photography and you do focus stacking. When you're taking multiple photos of the exact same image, but the different photos have a different depth in focus, and then you're compiling all those together and stacking them to make one final image with multiple depths in focus, that's the only time that focus breathing is going to be an issue for photography. But if you're not doing focus stacking photos, then this is not going to be a problem whatsoever, and this lens is incredible for photography. 20mm is definitely more on the wide side, but it's not ultra wide, so it's not something you would want to use for real estate photography. I wouldn't recommend it for portraits or people's faces, really. More for landscape or street photography. In those instances, it's incredible, or even astrophotography. The aperture of this lens can go from f1.8 to f22. And at f1.8, it definitely has great background separation. The background is very nice and blurred, and the transition between the subject in focus and that background blur is actually really nice. All in all, I think this has a pretty good cinematic look for a wide angle lens. And because it's an f1.8, this is a great lens for low light. Now, when it comes to sharpness for both video and photo, this is actually a really sharp lens. It's very well made. The center is tack sharp, even at f1.8, though the corners do get a little softer. But when you stop it down to f2.8, f3.5, etc., those corners get drastically sharper. Now, earlier I did touch about the lens distortion and how minimal it is. It is great even without any lens corrections on in the camera, but personally, I always have them on. I think for video, it's great to have that on, though when you're doing photos, if you're shooting in RAW, then you really don't have to worry about that. You can easily correct that in post. But even then, compared to other wide angle lenses, this is actually probably one of the more controlled when it comes to distortion. Now, this 20mm lens does have noticeable vignetting, but when you start to stop it down, that vignetting actually starts to go away. So around f2.8, f3.5, that vignetting is very minimal and barely noticeable. Now, for my personal test, this lens actually does really well when it comes to chromatic aberration. It's very minimal, as is flaring. That's very well controlled as well. Now, when it comes to autofocusing, this lens is great. It uses Sony's dual XD linear motor, which works well even in low light. It's really fast and pretty much silent. The great thing with the Sony cameras, especially now, the newer cameras, is that you have a lot of control over the actual autofocus speeds and transitions. Even at the fast settings, this lens really keeps up. It does great with face tracking, eye tracking, humans, animals, everything. Now, because this lens is pretty wide, another thing that I want to mention is that this is actually great for vlogging as well. Now, when it comes to the construction and build, it's extremely well made. It's actually made more like the G Master lenses, which is Sony's premium glass. It's weather resistant, dust and moisture sealed, has rubberized control rings, including a declickable aperture ring, has a custom button, and has a front filter thread size of 67 millimeters. It's only about 73.5 by 84.7 millimeters in size and weighs only 373 grams. It's extremely lightweight. For it being such a wide and fast lens, it's actually really compact and makes it great for using on a gimbal or even handheld. This is a fantastic lens by Sony that works great in video and photo. Just be mindful of those downfalls that I mentioned earlier in certain shooting scenarios. If you're not in those scenarios, then this shouldn't be a problem. And I highly recommend this lens, especially for YouTube videos. This is my #1 recommended lens if you're a Sony full frame shooter. The Sony 20mm f1.8 G lens retails for normally $900 US, though sometimes you can find it on sale for $800 US. I highly recommend it, and if you're interested in getting it, I do have links in the description where you can purchase it. It doesn't change the price that you get it at, but it does help this channel. Please make sure to drop a like on this video, drop a comment below if you have any questions, and please make sure to subscribe. I have a lot more videos coming soon. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.